Number 1. Marilyn Bergeron's disappearance is one of Canada's most haunting mysteries. Born in Quebec in 1983, she was a gifted kid who loved music, art, and languages. She was bright and curious about the world, but she was also a bit reckless, and her parents worried she'd get caught up with the wrong crowd. After getting a degree in media arts, she moved to Montreal in 2005, working as a freelance editor and a music store clerk. Her real dream, though, was to be a flight attendant and see everything the world had to offer. But that bright, happy girl didn't last. She became a paranoid wreck. By early 2008, she told her family she had to leave Montreal because she was terrified and didn't feel safe there anymore. On February 10, 2010, she suddenly ditched her apartment, and by the 16th, she was back at her parents' place in Quebec City. It was obvious to her family that something was seriously wrong. She was quiet and broken. Her sister, Natalie, said Marilyn would just stop talking and burst into tears whenever they asked what was going on. She told her mom it wasn't about money, drugs, or a bad breakup. But when her mom asked if she had been assaulted, Marilyn went dead silent and started sobbing. Her mother begged her to see a psychologist to finally dump the emotional weight she had been carrying. The very next day, February 17, 2010, she told her parents she was going for a walk. She put on her black coat and suede boots, grabbed her credit card and walked out at 11 a.m. A security camera caught her trying to pull $60 from an ATM, but the card was declined. In the footage, she's constantly looking over her shoulder like she's being hunted. That afternoon, she went to a Café Depot and bought a coffee. The clerk said she seemed agitated and desperate to get out of there. When Marilyn didn't come home that night, her parents knew she was in trouble and called the police. Investigators traced her card to the ATM and the coffee shop while her parents scoured the city with flyers. The story hit the front pages fast. When her parents finally saw the CCTV footage of Marilyn looking so anxious and withdrawn, they were devastated. She looked completely helpless. Crime reporter Claude Poirier looked into the case and stood at that same ATM. He noticed her eyes seemed fixed on a car parked across the street. Plus, that coffee shop was 16 miles from her parents' house. Even though she was fit, her family thinks it's much more likely that someone drove her there. But to this day, no one has admitted to giving her a lift. The trail went cold for 2 years until a man told Poirier that Marilyn was in Hawkesbury, Ontario. Other locals backed him up, saying they'd seen her living in the area with a man for over a year. Marilyn's family was fed up with the lack of progress. The police weren't looking for a criminal. They were treating it like a suicide or a simple disappearance. Her parents fought to get the SQ or the Montreal police to take over the case, but their requests were shut down. In February 2017, the family held a press conference to vent their anger. The Quebec City Police claimed they were doing their best, but the family's lawyer, Marc Bellemare, slammed them for refusing to hand the case over to a more capable force. A tip line was set up, the reward hit $30,000, and soon there were 43 new sightings reported. Then there's the story from Jonathan Gaultier, a friend from college. He saw her in Montreal in late 2007 and was shocked at how much she'd changed. The positive girl he knew was gone. She was now despondent, sitting in the dark listening to music. At a party, she got spooked by something a friend said and begged to go home. Back at her apartment, she started crying uncontrollably. Jonathan asked her if she'd been raped or if she'd seen a murder. She told him no, it was something much worse. She wouldn't say another word, telling him he couldn't even imagine what she'd been through. Jonathan felt like she was hiding the truth just to keep him out of danger. Marilyn Bergeron's case is still open. Since she walked out of that coffee shop on February 17, 2010, there hasn't been a single trace of her. If you know anything about what happened to Marilyn, contact the authorities. Number 2. Bethany Decker was a sharp, hard-working girl from Fredericksburg, Virginia. She was juggling a full-time job while studying global and economic change at George Mason University. Around that time, she got involved with Emil Decker, a guy in the Army National Guard. She got pregnant, they tied the knot in 2009, and soon they had a baby boy. Because of his military job, Emil was often deployed to Afghanistan, leaving Bethany to handle her life with the help of her in-laws, who watched the kid while she went to school and worked. But the marital bliss was a lie. While waitressing, she met Ronald Roldan, an immigrant from Bolivia, and it wasn't long before they were having a full-blown affair. Things with Emil hit a breaking point, and Bethany moved into an apartment in Ashburn. Ronald moved in pretty much immediately, and the relationship turned toxic fast. Ronald was a total control freak. He'd harass her all day, demanding she send photos to prove where she was and who she was with. Bethany was trapped. Her family was desperately trying to find a way to get her out, But by the end of the year she was pregnant again. Since she was still seeing Emil whenever he was on leave, nobody even knew who the father was. In January 2011, Emil and Bethany went on a trip to Hawaii to try and patch things up. When they got back, they stayed with his parents who had no clue the marriage was rotting. On the morning of January 29th, Emil saw Bethany one last time before she headed back to the apartment she shared with Ronald. She called her job to confirm her shifts for the next week, and Ronald says he saw her that afternoon. On February 2nd, Emil got redeployed, but Bethany never showed up to the airport to say goodbye. People just figured it was because of their relationship drama. It wasn't unusual to go a few days without hearing from her. She was a busy mom, student, and worker. She seemed active on Facebook, but the messages she was sending started sounding weird. Her friends called her mom, Kim, to tell her that the messages from Bethany's account didn't feel like they were coming from her. On February 19th, Kim sent her parents to check on the apartment. They found her car in the parking lot, but it looked abandoned, covered in dust, with a flat tire and parked at a messy angle. When no one answered the door, the panic set in. They raised the alarm and reported her missing. The investigation turned up some chilling facts. Her bank account hadn't been touched. Her phone had been dead since January 29th. She hadn't shown up to work or school. It was a messy love triangle, so the cops focused on both Emil and Ronald. Emil came home to talk to the police, while Ronald just played it off, saying he thought she'd gone back to her parents. But Ronald's past was dark. He had a record for identity theft and trashing property. He couldn't keep his story straight about Bethany's car either. Cops searched his new place and seized his tech, but found nothing. Meanwhile, Emil was granted a divorce from a wife who had vanished into thin air. Ronald only ever made one public statement through his lawyer, claiming he was hopeful she'd come home. But his true nature came out later with a woman named Vicky Willoughby. Just like with Bethany, he was abusive and controlling. During a massive fight, Vicky pulled a gun on him, but he wrestled it away and shot her 3 times. Miraculously, Vicky survived, though she lost an eye and will carry the scars forever. She wasn't charged because it was self-defense, but Ronald got 6 to 8 years in prison. Vicky eventually went on Dr. Phil, warning everyone that another girl was going to get hurt by this man if people didn't wake up. Once Ronald serves his time, the government is going to deport him. There's no record of Bethany ever giving birth to that second baby, and there is still no trace of her. If you have any information about what happened to Bethany Decker, please contact the authorities. Number 3. CCTV is usually the ultimate witness. It pieces together the timeline when everyone else is looking the other way. But even in a world covered in cameras, people still manage to vanish into thin air. It's a chilling mystery what happens when the CCTV trail just ends and the investigation hits a wall. This is the story of Trevor Dealy. Trevor was born in August 1978, the 5th child in a big family from County Kildare. He was a sharp, ambitious guy who knew exactly where he was going. By his early 20s, he had a solid career in the IT department for the Bank of Ireland. Everything seemed to be going right for him until the night of December 7, 2003. It was the work Christmas party. The night started at Copperface Jack's and the Hilton before moving to Buck Whaley's nightclub. Trevor left the club around 3:30 a.m. and started walking toward his apartment on Serpentine Avenue. About 10 minutes later, he stopped at his office. Security let him in, and he made himself a cup of tea while chatting with his co-worker, Carl, who was on the night shift. Trevor checked his emails and even made a to-do list for the next day. Because there was a massive storm and a taxi strike, he headed back out on foot at 4:03 a.m., carrying an umbrella. He called his friend Glenn and left a quick voicemail. "Hi Glenn, missed you. Just on my way home, all good. Talk tomorrow." It was a totally normal, casual message, so normal that his friends eventually deleted it. But the bank's CCTV caught something disturbing. A man dressed in black had been waiting outside the building for 30 minutes before Trevor even arrived. When Trevor showed up, the two had a brief conversation. By the time Trevor left the office for the final time, the man was gone. Or so it seemed. At 4:14 a.m., cameras caught Trevor walking past the AIB Bank on the corner of Bagot Street Bridge. Just 30 seconds later, that same man in black is seen following him. That 4:14 a.m. footage is the last time anyone ever saw Trevor Dealy. At first, no one thought it was weird that he didn't show up for work. Everyone assumed he was just recovering from the party. His flatmates were out of town, so they had no idea he was gone. It wasn't until Monday that the alarm was finally raised. The bank called his family, and when they realized no one had heard from him, they reported him missing. Trevor's family didn't wait around for the police to act. They were incredibly proactive. They handed out thousands of flyers and put up posters all over Dublin. But because those first few days were lost, vital clues had already vanished. The investigation went everywhere. Cops even flew to Alaska to talk to a girl Trevor had met on vacation, but it was another dead end. Search teams dragged the River Dodder and the Grand Canal, but they found nothing. Trevor's sister, Michelle, remembers calling his phone that weekend and is convinced it actually rang. Experts say if the phone was in the water, it would have died instantly, but Michelle still isn't 100% sure what she heard. 16 years passed with no answers. The case was reopened in 2016, and by 2017, they managed to enhance the old CCTV. Police confirmed the man following Trevor was the same guy from outside the bank, but they still couldn't identify him. That same year, a tip led police to a 3-acre site in a Dublin suburb. They heard a rumor that Trevor had been murdered that night by a well-known criminal from Crumlin, a guy involved in drugs and prostitution. The theory was that Trevor just happened to cross paths with a killer by mistake. Wrong place, wrong time. The search was called off by September. To this day, the case of Trevor Dealy remains wide open and unsolved. If you know anything about what happened to him, contact the authorities. Number 4. The mystery surrounding Marcia Brantley's disappearance has gripped the public for years. She was born Marcia Allen Rader in 1959. An only child from Illinois, she had family all over the states but kept her inner circle tight. She was a strong, no-nonsense woman who didn't take crap from anyone. She lived for animals, constantly fostering dogs, but her real dream was writing. She even started a writing club and kept a blog about every little detail of her life. In 2000, she married Donnie Brantley. She wrote later that it was the happiest day of her life, a day full of joy with family and food. But the same year she got married, tragedy hit hard. She lost both her parents to cancer just weeks apart. 4 years she stayed active on her blog, Magpie's Nest, writing movie reviews or complaining about the harsh Tennessee weather. On Facebook, she made Donnie look like the perfect husband, posting about him bringing her roses. "He's a keeper," she'd say in the comments. But online reality is usually a lie. Her friend Nancy Grill knew the truth: the relationship was a mess. Donnie was antisocial and couldn't care less about the things Marcia loved. On June 2, 2009, Marcia posted on Facebook asking if the planets were out of alignment because everything was going wrong. Someone commented on the roses Donnie gave her, but Marcia never answered. That was it. No more posts. The blog went dead. Total silence. It wasn't until July or August that people really noticed she was gone. She stopped walking her dogs, which was a huge red flag. A worried neighbor, Phyllis Dodd, finally knocked on the door. Donnie answered and just said she left him and they were getting a divorce. Phyllis told her hairdresser, who told a lawyer, who eventually got the TBI involved. By November, investigators had almost nothing to go on. Marcia was private and 5 months had already passed. Donnie stuck to his story. She left on her own to get a divorce. But the cops weren't buying it. A search of the house made things worse. Her car was still there. Her clothes were still in the closet. Everything she owned was right where she left it. No one believed a woman intending to leave her husband would leave all that behind, and she definitely wouldn't leave her foster dogs. The cops found receipts. Donnie had bought a plastic drop cloth, a welder's kit, a tarp, and a pressure washer. Exactly the kind of things you'd use to get rid of a body. Then a weird email turned up. Marcia supposedly told her writing club she'd be missing for some time without explaining why. Her friend Reggie J was shocked because Marcia was all about commitment to the group. Another friend said Marcia had mentioned leaving the group in confidence, but no one could trace where that email actually came from. There were rumors she took $110,000 in cash she had hidden and left a note on her car telling Donnie to sell it. But the police didn't preserve the note, and they didn't believe the money even existed. In 2012, they searched the house again with cadaver dogs, convinced of foul play but found nothing. In 2013, the state indicted Donnie for first-degree murder, even without a body. They had two motives: he was cheating and he was broke. Donnie's repair business was failing after the 2009 crash. After Marcia vanished, her signature was used to sell the business. One expert said it was her, another said it was a fake. Then there was the phone. Marcia's incoming calls stopped the day she vanished. Donnie said she took a new phone with her, but it turned out he was using that same phone to call dating lines. He was looking for something different. The prosecution also brought up a kiss he shared with an ex before Marcia disappeared. Her friend said Marcia wouldn't have just left over an affair, she would have been furious and kicked him out of the house her parents built. Right after she vanished, Donnie hand-delivered a card to that ex-girlfriend. It said, "Things are better for me now." To the cops, that was a confession of murder. To the defense, it was just a guy moving on. The prosecution used the receipts and a landfill ticket to argue this was a cold, planned murder. The defense said the receipts were just for his job. Donnie's story kept changing, especially about their camper van. He told the cops it was at a campground, but it wasn't there. They eventually found it at his parents' farm in Georgia, but it was clean. The defense claimed the cops were biased and had poisoned the neighbors' opinions of Donnie. Nancy Grill eventually started doubting Marcia, just walked away once she heard how much Donnie had lied. Meanwhile, the district was getting hit with claims of corruption and misconduct. The defense also pushed the idea that Marcia was severely depressed and taking hormone shots. A week before the trial, the family asked to drop the charges. They didn't want him found not guilty because then she'd never get justice. In 2016, he was indicted again for second-degree murder, but those records were later wiped clean. 18 months later, right before jury selection, the charges were dropped again. The DA was scared they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Since 2009, there's been no trace of Marcia. No social security, no visas, nothing. She just stopped existing. If you have any information about what happened to Marcia Brantley, please contact the authorities. Number 5. Skidmore, Missouri, is the setting for this tragic and disturbing story. To give you some context, this tiny town of less than 400 people already had a dark reputation when it came to crime. It was at the center of a massive media circus in the early 80s. A local man named Ken McElroy was a notorious bully, accused of everything from theft to rape. He kept getting off with light sentences, which pushed the people of Skidmore to the edge. In 1981, he was shot dead in broad daylight in a vigilante-style execution. Even though his wife saw the whole thing, the entire town stayed quiet and refused to back her up. 20 years later, that same code of silence would swallow Skidmore once again. Branson Cain Perry was born on February 24, 1981. His parents split up in late 2000, but he was the center of their world. He was a high school grad, a black belt in martial arts, and worked odd jobs around town to make ends meet. After the divorce, he lived with his dad, Bob, at 304 West Oak Street. On April 7, 2001, Branson visited his neighbor, Jason Behrman. While he was there, he ended up being drugged. Under the influence, he stripped down and had sex with Behrman. Everyone knew Branson was gay and had been with men before, but he was humiliated and upset by this encounter. He told his dad, and Bob was livid that someone had taken advantage of his son. 4 days later, Branson had a friend named Gina over. Bob was due home from the hospital soon, and Branson wanted the house clean for him. Outside, 2 random guys were working on Bob's car. What happened that day is a complete mess. Branson's mother, Rebecca, says the timeline makes no sense and the details are sketchy. At one point, Gina saw Branson run into the kitchen, grab something from a cabinet and bolt out the back door. When he came back, he wouldn't say what he was doing and acted like nothing had happened. Later, while Gina was in the shower, she came out to find one of the car guys digging through the kitchen cabinets. When she asked what he was looking for, he said, "Nothing," and walked back out. Around 3 p.m., Gina heard the porch door shut. She looked out the window and saw Branson. He told her he was just going to put the jumper cables in the shed and would be right back. He never walked back through that door. The guys working on the car claimed they never saw him. Nobody did. When he didn't return, Gina figured he just got sidetracked, so she headed home. The next day, April 12th, Branson's grandma stopped by. The door was unlocked and the house was empty. After a few days of no contact, the family realized something was very wrong. Bob got home from the hospital, and they reported Branson missing on April 17th. The police searched a 15-mile radius around the house. They found nothing in the fields or old buildings. They couldn't even find the jumper cables he was supposedly putting away. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that they suddenly turned up just inside the shed door. For 6 weeks, cops interviewed over 100 people in Skidmore, trying to find a lead. Gina told them Branson had been experimenting with weed and speed. A family member confirmed he had a bottle of Valium on him the day he vanished. Cops looked into local drug users, but everyone passed their polygraphs. There were rumors of drug debts, but nothing was proven. Bob's first thought was that Branson was too ashamed of the situation with Behrman and had hitched a ride to Kansas City to hide out. The case went cold until 2003. That's when 59-year-old pastor and scout leader Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested. His crimes were horrific: child porn, assault, and even a botched surgery where he removed a trans woman's genitalia in a hotel room. While investigating him, police found online posts where he bragged about picking up a blonde male hitchhiker. He described raping, torturing, and mutilating the young man before burying him in the Ozarks. Cops thought they finally had a link to Branson, but Rogers denied everything. He claimed the posts were just a sick fantasy. Police searched Rogers' house and found a turtle claw necklace in his car that looked just like one Branson used to wear. In 2004, Rogers was convicted of assault and illegal surgery, getting 24 years total, plus 30 years for the child porn. During his sentencing, Branson's mother, Rebecca, begged him for the truth. He maintained he didn't know anything about her son. Eventually, Rebecca stopped believing he was involved. She said she felt in her heart that the answer was still in Skidmore, that someone in that town knew the secret. Sadly, Bob died in 2004, just 3 years after his son vanished. The family and the police kept fighting, but the leads were dry. In 2009, a tip suggested Branson's remains were in Quitman, Missouri, but it led nowhere. Then, in 2011, Rebecca died after a long battle with cancer. Her friend Monica Clazen vowed to keep the search alive. Rebecca was buried next to an empty grave for Branson, with his death date listed as April 11, 2001, the last day he was seen alive. Branson's case is still open. If you have any information about what happened to Branson Perry, please contact the authorities. For more crimey videos, do subscribe and let me know in the comment box.